Good afternoon. Welcome to another edition of Talk of the Towns. We have a very exciting and very interesting, I think, topic here today, and we're going to be talking to the state historian in just a few moments. But before we do, as always, we ask that you make sure that if you like what you see, to please hit like, subscribe, and share, or share, like, and subscribe, as we always say. It's important. It helps us get the word out there about all things towns as we talk about all the things that are important to our towns. And today we have a really, I think, very interesting topic. We're going to be talking about history in the state of New York. As you all know, we've been focusing on getting ready for the 250th anniversary. That will be a topic we talk about here today in a few moments. But we want to remind you that if you want to be part of the story, and we think towns should be part of the story of the nation's 250th birthday, please make sure you get us our story. Our very talented Nick Benton will work with you on getting a story out there to share with the rest of the state, and you can become part of the story that we are putting together on the town's history and an interesting documentary that Nick is starting to work on. So we're going to tease that one a little bit. But now I'd like to welcome our guest. We have with us the state historian. He's the 16th state historian. He is also before becoming the state historian, the executive director of the Museum Association of New York. So he knows what it's like to be part of an association. He has worked in legislative and policy for the chair of the New York State Assembly Tourism, Arts, Parks, and Sports Development, and also the GovOps committee in the New York State Assembly. He has a BA in the history from Plattsburgh, an MA in public history from SUNY Albany. And he and I have some overlap. We were chatting a little bit about that on some of our education and some of our work experience. So I also have an MA in public history as well. Devin, it's very intimidating, has his own podcast, A New York Minute in History, which is produced by WAMC Northeast Public Radio, and he's the co-editor of New York History Journal, published by the Cornell University Press. So very, very impressive. He was also elected as a New York Academy of History Fellow in 2020. Devin, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always great to speak to another public historian and certainly speak to our towns, who I am always interested in learning more about what your association does and the great work of our town governments. And I agree with you right off the bat that the towns play a huge role in New York's history, as we know, and American history as well. So I encourage anyone at the town level to reach out and try to tell their story. It's really what we're trying to do from a statewide perspective is tell the local stories that make up the state history. So again, thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for taking time. I got to tell you, this was probably one of the more impressive bios that we've gotten through. So I had a lot to say there. Hope I did it justice. But I do want to give you a moment, talk a little bit about the New York Minute in History, your podcast. Where can people hear or see or whatever, however it's distributed?
Sure. Well, we always say wherever you get your podcast. So we're on Spotify, Google, Apple Podcasts. You can also download it from the New York State Museum website.
Okay.
Or the WAMC podcasts website. We are also streamed on NPR as well. So it's a lot of fun. I'm trying to remember when we first started it. I think it was 2018. It was definitely pre-pandemic. We came up with the idea to do a history podcast, and initially the podcast was different than what it is now. It was about an hour long. It was kind of more of a long form program. I had a friend of mine who is a television host working with me on that, just because he's also interested in history and he has the background of being a presenter and that kind of stuff, which I really felt like I didn't know much about, and I didn't think I would be very good at it. So long story short is the way we do the podcast kind of changed over time. He went back to television because he's a busy guy, and he's doing television and other things like that. So we reached out to the William G. Pomeroy Foundation, who For those in your audience who know, they're a foundation based in Syracuse that does historic markers.
Hmm.
The new blue and gold ones, you
Yeah.
see them all around the state. They also have other color markers for other types of topics that they do: transportation, women's history. They have a really cool one called Hungry for History,
Oh.
which talks about, food that was unique to certain
Mm.
areas. So like the buffalo wing,
Oh yeah.
in New
Yeah.
York, the Saratoga chip, that type of thing. But they're great. They do deep research, and they ensure that primary source materials are used so that when they do a historic marker, it's accurate.
Yeah.
And they're our main funder for the podcast. Each episode now is about a half hour long, and it focuses on one of the Pomeroy
Oh, neat.
markers. And
Yeah.
then we take the story from there. My co-host now and for the last several years is Lauren Roberts,
Mm.
who is a Saratoga County historian and a local municipal historian. And yeah, we have a lot of fun doing it. It's really cool. We just released one earlier this week, actually, on Winifred Goldring, who is the first female state paleontologist,
Oh,
we think, in the world, certainly in the United States and
neat.
in New York. She worked at the State Museum for several decades, and was a really groundbreaking, scientist and exhibit designer, and also a scientist who wrote for the general public.
Mm.
So anyway, it's a fun podcast. We're constantly learning new things as we do it, as I'm sure you are, and it's just a lot of fun to do.
Well, now you're working with an amateur, so I don't have any
I'm
experience in
still an amateur,
television or
right?
anything else. We're just having fun with
Yeah,
the topic about town. So, it's funny because my kids say all the time they're pretty impressed with the viewership we get because they say it's such a niche topic,
yeah,
towns, right? Local
right.
government. How many people know about local government? And that's really our passion, is to bring local government forward. But part of that is history and how
Mhm.
important history is to a community. It's the collective memory. We know this, and so people that don't know their history, of course, the saying goes, are going to repeat it, and what
Mhm.
that means is people just don't understand where they came from. They don't understand who they are
Right.
fully. So the work you do is so important. And as a state historian, can you talk a little bit about what that is that you do, what your role and responsibility is?
Sure. It's kind of it varies really. The state historian as a position has existed in New York since 1895. We were the first state in the nation to create a position dedicated to the state's history. Originally, it was an appointed position appointed by the governor. In 1911, that changed and it became a position within the state ed department because that's where the state library was,
Mhm.
and it just seemed to fit better. So really, since 1911, the position's been part of the state ed department. Currently, I'm housed at the State Museum, right up the road here. I just walked right over. It's not
Beautiful
far.
day.
Yeah, beautiful day for it. And yeah, and the position has changed over time. At one time early on, it was directed to really do research and publish the history of the state, and that's the type of work that the first few state historians did.
Mhm.
Over time, it also went on to include things like overseeing what is now called the New York State Archives. At
Mhm.
that time, there was no separate state archives, and so the state historian was kind of tasked with managing the state's records
Mhm.
and also working with municipalities, local governments, on preserving their records and really establishing what we would come to later be known as the Government Records Program and the State Archives programs. So the state historian did that kind of work. At one point, the state historian also oversaw the state historic sites,
Mhm.
which are now part of the state parks, um, um, state parks.
Mhm.
And Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic
Yes.
Preservation. But at the time, there was no separate agency that had those, so the state historian did that. Now, as you noted, I work on a variety of projects, including the podcast, including the New York History Journal, which has been around since 1901, and is now being published by Cornell University Press in partnership with the State Museum, and two of my colleagues and myself are the editors, along with Dr. Robert Childs from the University of Maryland, who is a great Al Smith scholar. So if you're
Oh,
into Al Smith, check out his book, The Revolution of 28.
okay.
So we do that. We publish the journal. I also in statute, the state historian really oversees the local government historians. So
Mhm.
that's a big part of the duties, right? In 1919, New York, again, the first in the nation, became the first state to create the position of local government historian for the villages, the towns. Eventually, the counties were added in the 1930s, the 5 boroughs.
Mm.
So New York was and I think still is unique. Although there are a couple other states that have local government historians. I know Connecticut does, but for a long time, New York was the only one. And what it really did was create a matrix of local historians who were tasked with, just as you say, preserving, promoting, and protecting the village or town's history. And that network still exists. We have local historians all around the state who are doing amazing work. I work with them on mostly through their association, the Association of Public Historians of New York State. We'll be going to their conference next week,
Yeah.
actually, and I give the state of New York history talk at that, and work with them on best practices and ways for to help them do their job. They all report to the state historian. They send me reports every year, or at least they're supposed to send me reports every year, just updating me on what's going on and what work they're doing. And so we work, very closely with them. Within the last 5 years or so, the state historian has taken over the museum chartering function, at least overseeing it on behalf of the Board of Regents. New York is unique still in the nation as being a state in which museums are chartered as education corporations, not as simply not for profit.
Right.
So they're actually chartered with the mission of being education focused. So I oversee that aspect. So if there's new museums that are looking to be chartered, or in some cases, museums have provisional charter and they're looking to get an absolute charter, or they're making amendments to, their board, their bylaws, things like that. So we work very closely with all of the museums
Mm.
in the state, and we work closely with the Museum Association, and as I mentioned, the Association of Public Historians. So, and I also, when I have time, I research and write history about New York State as
Oh,
much as possible, and I answer researcher questions. I answer questions that may come from government agencies. The last few years, and I'm sure we're going to get into the 250th, I've been spending a lot of time working on that project.
yeah, there's a lot going on. I'm
Yeah.
going to be at that conference as well, by the way. I've been asked
Right.
to be on a panel to talk about the 250, and we will get into that one because it is so important. Um, but when you think about all the responsibilities you have, the role that you have, and working with the local government historians, which I think New York, you're right, is a leader in that and so important. One thing I wish local governments would do for local government officials watching now is put more resources into the historian.
Hmm.
I've lamented the fact that some of them are volunteers,
Yes.
some of them don't get paid more than $5,000 a year,
Right.
some don't have the resources, an office or anything like that. So,
Yep.
I like to see local governments take that responsibility more seriously because it is so important. Keeping records for what, and everyone always thinks about, oh, it's about, maybe presenting the past, and that's
Hmm.
part of it, but it's also preserving
Hmm.
what's going on today for
Right.
posterity, for what's going to come tomorrow. And so I think we're losing some of that by
Hmm.
not treating it as seriously as it should be on a local level.
Yeah, I totally agree. And one of the things that we see as we're dealing with local government historians is that variety. Some are full-time employees. Some of the county historians are
Yeah.
full-time employees with um, you know I would say decent salaries, maybe not great salaries, but decent salaries. And then we also have a lot of village historians, town historians who are volunteers
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah.
And I do encourage, along with you, local governments as much as possible to support those positions, because it does exactly what you said. It preserves the history, but it also helps, I think, regions and municipalities understand that they were sites of history,
Yeah.
right? That history happened here, right?
Yeah.
And that improves pride of place. I'm trying to say it, pride of place. But it also, in some cases, depending on what part of the region or part of the state you're in, it can also attract tourists,
Yeah.
attract genealogists.
Yeah.
Local historians work very closely with genealogists in helping them with their research. So, which brings people in and gets people interested in the community in that way. So there is a lot that a well supported local historian can do for a community.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is so fascinating. You had mentioned that obviously 2026 will mark the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence.
Yep.
We're all trying to prepare for that. What is it that New York State is going to do to try to commemorate that?
So I'll give you a little history because that's what I do. So we started talking about the 250th in 2018 as an agency. So the State Museum, State Archives, and State Library, where I work, it's called the Office of Cultural Ed. It's part of the State Ed Department. We started talking with fellow agencies like the Office of Parks, Recreation and Historic Preservation, I Love New York, the folks at the National Park Service within our state about, okay, what should we be doing about the 250, which
Yeah.
seemed like it was a long ways away at that point. So what we decided to do was basically a listening tour of the state where we set up meetings around the state and invited folks in the field and museum field and historic sites, academia, teachers, people who are kind of working in the field, and ask them what do you envision this looking like here. And we were able to get 4 of those in before COVID. So COVID really hurt everyone, but we kept the conversation going. And one of the things that we were hearing from folks in the field is that the idea of looking at it as a commemoration, not necessarily a celebration
Hmm.
in every case. Some of the past commemorations, were more celebratory, and we know that the past is very complex. There were things that happened during that time period that were negative, frankly, especially for our indigenous nations. So we really took that in mind, and we kept the conversations going during COVID. And what we did initially, as time was progressing in 2020, 2021, we put together a field guide with the Association of Public Historians. And one of the reasons we did that was because they were having questions or getting questions from their communities. What are we going to do and what should we be doing? So we based our field guide on the American Association of State and Local Histories field guide. We came up with 6 themes for New York State, which are quite broad,
Hmm.
intentionally broad, because we know that different parts of the state have different stories to tell, and some have, like Saratoga, for example, have major revolutionary events that happened there. Others, the communities were wholly indigenous at the time, and the farther west you go. So we kept that in mind and came up with these themes. And kind of concurrently to that, legislation was introduced in the state assembly and the state senate by Senator Mayer and Assembly Member Warner, creating a commission,
Hmm.
which New York does. It creates commissions for these types of commemorations, as they did in the bicentennial and so on. So we kept our eye on that, and eventually that did pass both houses unanimously, which is rare nowadays. The governor signed it, and then it took a couple years for, frankly, for the appointments to happen. So we were kind of in a limbo world there for a while, but we were continuing to have these discussions and continuing to talk about the commemoration. And eventually the commission met. We met for the first time last March, I think, or May. And the commission really hit the ground running. We knew that we were up against the clock,
Yeah.
and we needed to move fast on things. So the commission has 12 appointed members, and then it has agency representatives. There's 21 total uh, um, appointments or commissioners. I'm one of them, but I'm also kind of the staff person for it because it's co-chaired by the Commissioner of State Ed, my boss,
Yep.
and the Commissioner of State Parks, which
Okay.
oversees our SHPO and historic sites. So I work with staff at the state parks on facilitating the meetings. And the first thing that we did was put together a strategic plan last year. Took us a while to do that because of the scope and how we're looking at telling this very complex story. Because we're directed within the legislation not only to talk about what happened in 1775 and
Right.
76 until 1783, but it's really about the 250 years that have happened.
So I'm glad you brought that up, because
Mhm.
that's the one thing that we've been really emphasizing to our members, because some members will say, we're not Saratoga, we're not the turning point of the river, we don't have that kind of history. But
Yes.
really, it's more about the entire history that's happened over the 250 years, because that's the story of America. That's the
Right.
story of your community. So we are looking for all those stories. We've got some interesting things already that came in. The first butter mill, I think,
Wow.
was down in where was it, Nick? Hamptonburg.
Okay.
And then became the supplier of the U.S. Navy.
Okay.
There's all this type of stuff. My own town of Glenville, I'm always proud to say we were the first piece of airmail flew out of the town of Glenville at the GE hangar when they opened it. Doolittle was there. General Doolittle was there to open it. And the airmail went from Glenville to President Truman. And so there's all this history all over the state. It doesn't have to be about the revolution.
Right. Yeah. And
That's important.
yeah, and that's a great point, and that's something that we were hearing as well. As we were putting together initially the field guide, we were hearing from some of the communities that were saying, "Yeah, well, nothing happened here," and it's like, well, that's impossible.
Yeah.
So we came up with this. It wasn't our idea, but we really grabbed onto the idea of the unfinished revolution, right? So the American Revolution was incomplete in many ways, right? Did not include women, did not include basically anyone other than landowning white men at the time. But over the 250 years since then, there's been these other revolutions, and New York has played a role in so many of them as the ground zero for so many of them, including the suffrage movement. Things like the Underground Railroad, the abolition movement, right up till more modern, the environmental movement, the labor movement, all of these things that really happened in New York. So once you start talking about that with communities, and you start hearing, oh yeah, well we had a suffragist, or we were a stop on the Underground Railroad, or other events and that makes it a more inclusive and I think a more representative commemoration too. So that's something that is in the legislation too. There's direct in the legislative intent for the commission. It directs the commission to think in those broad terms. So the commission created its strategic plan. They based the themes that are in the strategic plan on our field guide theme. Because they like those. They were, expansive enough to include every part of the state. So we moved forward with that. And then in the last budget, which passed this year, the commission was given an appropriation for the first time. So we have a $5 million appropriation. The legislation directs half of that to go to the state historic sites for capital improvements and programming around the American Revolution, or the revolution, unfinished revolution idea, and then the rest goes to the state ed department to be regranted out. So we're in the process of regranting that money out to the counties, which are going to be in the position at that point to subgrant that or decide what they're going to do with it.
So that grant's only going from only going to the counties, and the counties can.
The counties, yeah, as long as it adheres to the strategic plan themes, like they have to use it for something related to the 250.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's literally going out, went out this morning,
Oh, wow.
letter from SED. So
Making news right here today.
yeah, so yeah. So for those of you who are obviously you're all in counties, reach out to your county leadership if you have plans. We're encouraging that, and yeah, and the commission is moving forward with that. We're also some of the resources are being used for a major exhibit that we're doing at the State Museum on the American Revolution in New York and the Unfinished Revolution. So it's been in the news lately. If you haven't had a chance to go and see the bateau that was found at Ground
Oh,
Zero,
yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
Revolutionary era gunboat actually that was found underneath the World Trade Center after the tragically fell. We have that back. It's going to be the centerpiece of our exhibit. It tells the story of not only what happened in New York during the American Revolution, but it really shows New York's role in world events beyond that. So
So so the State Museum has plans to
Mhm.
commemorate the 250th as well, and this could be an exhibit.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, it's going to be a major exhibit that's going to be
Mhm.
up for all 8 years, and that's one thing I want to mention about New York's commission. Excuse me. Unlike the National Commission or maybe some other states, our commission runs the entire length of the Revolutionary era.
Yep.
So the commission does not sunset until 2033 because we have events that took place in New York all along that time frame. Plus, there's many other commemorations that are taking place. I know we're celebrating the Erie Canal this year. In 27 we'll be celebrating, I would say, and commemorating the end of enslavement in New York, the gradual abolition that happened in 1827. Most people don't realize New York
Yeah.
was a slave colony and a slave state for 200 years. And it wasn't until 1827 that finally ended. So we're going to be commemorating that in 27, and that's part of our kind of unfinished revolution
Yeah.
idea. That these evolving movements that happened in New York took time. The American Revolution was the starting point,
Yeah.
but it wasn't the end.
Right.
And we're still living that reality now.
Right. I mean, it's like any ideal, right? You
Hmm.
continue to have to work for and strive for,
Yep.
and it isn't always what it is. It's not. Most ideals aren't ending points. They're
Right.
mostly things that you have to strive and continue to work towards. And so, I think we have a great opportunity next year, starting next year in 2026, to tell those stories and really celebrate and commemorate
Hmm.
and all those things of all the great things that have happened in our state and in our nation. If people want to get a hold of you
Hmm.
or maybe interact with the state, they have a question, they want to get, how can they contact you?
Yeah, so we have what we call the Office of State History website. So if you Google, I know this for a fact because I check it out. If you Google Office of State History, we're the one that comes up. So that's a way we have a website. That website includes events that are going on around the state, not just at our facility. But I try to put up events, around the state. Also news on what's happening around the 250th, but
Mm.
but any other news, the podcast, things like that, that's all on the Office of State History website. The New York State 250th Commission has its own website as well, which we manage. So there's information there. If you Google New York State 250th, that'll come up. And I can always be reached at my email, which is devin.lander@nysed.gov. That's the easiest way because I travel a lot. I'm not always at my desk.
Yeah.
Like I said, next week I'll be joining you
Yeah.
in Cazenovia
About that,
and
yes.
at the conference, and there's a lot going on.
And the journal, can people subscribe to that or?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you for reminding me. So you can also subscribe to the journal on our Office of State History website. As I said, it's published by Cornell. It comes out twice a year. It comes out in hard copy and digitally, so you can get it both ways. It's a journal that started off when it started in 1901 or 1899. I think it actually started in 1899. It was heavily an academic journal, and it still is. We still have academic articles, but we try to also have some public history
Yeah.
elements. So we do things like exhibit reviews,
Yeah.
documentary film reviews, book reviews, all that stuff. And it's 100% about New York State history.
Yeah.
So we also do a really cool thing called Community New York, which is a way for us to focus on what's going on in communities and community history. A lot of our local historians
Amazing.
write for that.
Great.
So yeah, we try to really use the journal and the podcast and really everything we're doing at the Office of State History as a way to talk about what is going on in the entire field,
Yeah.
museums, academia, schools, because it is so important. And history is a contentious subject sometimes, and people, it sometimes makes people uncomfortable to know about these things, but it's vital that we do. I mean,
Right.
the reality is these things happen. Our country and our state, has gone through tough times
Mm.
and come out the other side, and there's so much to celebrate.
Yeah.
Like, we don't discourage celebration because there is a lot to celebrate, but we also have to think about some of the other I would say more complex or darker
Yeah.
sides of history.
You have a great position though, because really, as you said, and as we've talked about, New York is one of the leaders, has been historically. So much has happened here historically. I mean, we touched on the Erie Canal, and you could talk about all the impact that has had on not just the state but the nation.
Sure.
I remember reading the debates that I think it was Van Buren. I think it was Van Buren did not want any investment in infrastructure, and
Mhm.
how interesting it is that how what it really did for the state once it was built.
Sure.
Calling it Clinton's ditch for a while, everyone thought it was a big failure. I mean, there's so many great stories about that. My flavor of history is a little bit more political leaning. I like all the political history of the state. When you think about the Teddy Roosevelt, the
Mhm.
Franklin Roosevelt, the
Mhm.
leaders that have come out for the nation,
Sure.
even the ones that didn't quite make it, although they thought they made it, Thomas Dewey or whatever,
Yeah.
all the you really think about all that's come out of New York State.
Yeah.
It's intriguing, and it's fascinating. So I think we have a lot to talk about over the coming year, and we'd love to have you come back
Sure.
and talk some more about it.
Absolutely, and the great part of this job, which is a great job, and it's really a dream job for me. But one of the great things about it is that New York has such deep history,
Yeah,
right? And there's so many layers, and I always am learning something new because you can't possibly know it all.
yeah,
And New York has played a role really from the very beginning in the colonies. And the what happened, with the Dutch
yeah,
initially, which really made us kind of different from the rest of the
mhm,
English colonies. So we have that Dutch influence
yeah.
that we still see today.
Still,
So we have that kind of story. We also have the story of the indigenous people that predated the Dutch and predated any kind of European contact. The Haudenosaunee, who had their own civilization and their own government and their own way of doing things. And then as time progressed, of course, you mentioned the Erie Canal, just literally a groundbreaking event, and on and on. New York was the Empire State for
yeah,
a reason,
absolutely.
and it was the driving force in early American economy and commerce and beyond.
Well, I mean, it was the first, and people don't realize this, but it was the first capital of the United States.
First capital of the United States.
George
Yeah,
Washington was sworn in down on Wall Street, right?
exactly,
Yeah, so
exactly.
it's unbelievable that people don't think about that. You ask that as a
Right.
trivia question, no one thinks of New
Yeah,
York.
exactly.
The people say Boston, they'll say Philadelphia, but they won't say New York.
Exactly. And even in events like the Civil War, for
Yeah,
example, not to in any way belittle our what sacrifices other states gave during that conflict, but in many ways the Civil War was New York versus the South,
yeah,
right? Because we were such an industrious state. We had the center of economy in New York City. We had the agriculture that was happening upstate that was feeding the armies, and so many of the soldiers themselves came from New York and fought in this conflict. And that's the story in World War I as
yeah.
well. So, New York has been there at the beginning of this nation, and it's going to be there forever.
Absolutely. Is there anything I missed that you want to?
No, this is great. I appreciate it, and thank you for the work you're doing. And we'll continue the conversation.
Well, thank you for being here. I appreciate it very much. And we want to thank you for listening or watching. As usual, as I said, make sure you please like, share, and subscribe to YouTube, Apple platform, or Spotify. Those are the three places we are at right now, and you can find us at any one of those. Please make sure you do that. If you want to send us some ideas on what you want to hear for the next couple podcasts, make sure you get into nytowns.org. I'm sorry, info@nytowns.org, info@nytowns.org, and we'd be glad to bring you whatever topics you'd like to talk about next. Coming up soon, watch for more information on this. We're launching a supervisors series. I'm going to give you a little teaser on that. That's all I'm going to say about that right now, but it's going to be very interesting. So watch for that, and we'll see you next time.